So if you are in the events industry, whether you're a coach, consultant, course creator, entrepreneur who's hosting events for your business, or maybe you're a planner planning an event on behalf of another client, whatever it is, it's likely that you're eventually going to find yourself dealing with a room block. And if you don't have the proper protection in place in your agreements, and you don't know what you're doing when it comes to room blocks, you can find yourself in some really terrible situations. And this is speaking directly from my own experience. When I first got started in the events industry, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what attrition was. I didn't know what a room block was. I didn't know you could actually go and put your own clauses inside of contracts to protect yourself. And I had some really amazing events that were almost ruined because of room block attrition. So I'm making this video for you so you don't make the same mistakes that I made when I first got started in the events industry. And these clauses that I'm going to show you, that I'm going to walk you through, can save you thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of dollars. So if you're not willing to sit down and watch this 15 to 20 minute video that could save you a ton of money down the line and increase the ROI of your events, then maybe you should consider changing to a different industry, because this is a very important video and I think it's going to be very valuable for you. So now, with all that talking, I'm going to jump into my computer and we're going to dive in. How to protect yourself from room block attrition. Now, before I dive in, I want to give a little explanation about how I'm going to be conducting this video. Over the next 5, 6, 7 slides, there's going to be clauses that I add into my contracts to protect myself and my clients. It might be a little bit more of a boring video. There's going to be a lot of text, a lot of contract lingo. However, this is one of the most important videos I have ever made. And one of these clauses, if not all of these clauses, could save you $1,000, tens of thousands of dollars, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how big your event is and how big your room block is. This is one of the most overlooked things in the events industry. And whether you're an entrepreneur who only cares about ROI and generating profit from your event, a room block can absolutely destroy that. And if you're an event planner or you own your own events company and you get your client locked into a room block case after the event, they're going to be extremely upset with you, and they'll probably tell everyone else that they know not to work with you, which could tarnish your reputation, could lose you money in the long run. You kind of get the point. This is very important stuff. It's often very overlooked. There are entire businesses built around selling rooms from a room block, just because so many people find themselves in situations with room blocks. So watch this video, watch it a second time, watch it a third time, completely understand it, and you will be an absolute weapon in the event industry if you can protect yourself, your clients, your ROI, your business, whatever it is, with these room block clauses. So with all that being said, I'm going to dive in. First one that I want to walk you through is a clause I call the guaranteed best rate clause. Now I'm going to read the first sentence of this. You kind of get the idea, and then I'll explain why I like to add it into my contracts. So the venue agrees that the group's contracted room rates shall be at least 10% lower than the lowest publicly available rates for the same room types over the contracted event dates. So what this means is during your event dates, the resort, venue, hotel, whoever you're working with cannot lower the public rates. They can't lower them below your contracted room rates. You will always have the lowest rates at the resort. And the reason I add this into my contract is because I actually had a resort that I was working with that gave us our discounted room rates. They're, let's say, just a round number, $200 a night for the hotel. And then as we were getting closer to the event, they lowered the public room rates to about $175 a night. So it looked like we were screwing our clients over because they had a higher room rate than was on the public website. We had a bunch of people go and book rooms through the public website, which doesn't get counted towards your room block. It can if you have all of the contact information for these people, but we had a few of them that fell through the cracks, and we definitely missed out on picking up some of those people just because they went and booked rooms directly through the website instead of through our room block, because the hotel lowered the public rate below our rate. So this clause right here guarantees that you will always have the lowest rate. You will always have a discounted rate because we added in the 10%, and you will always be protected in that regard. So that's the first clause I like to add in. Clause number 2, the reduction clause. So the group's contracted room block of 100 total rooms may be reduced by up to 20% without penalty if written notice is provided to the venue at least 60 days prior to arrival. Now, this one's pretty self-explanatory, but essentially, if you are not going to be fulfilling your initial room block, this gives you a way to reduce the total number of rooms that are contracted to you by 20%. In this case, 100 rooms will be reduced down to 80. And this has saved myself and clients a number of times where they weren't going to hit the original total amount of rooms that we had contracted. We reduced them, and then we ended up hitting the room block at that reduced amount. And even if you don't hit that reduced amount, say you hit 75 rooms instead of 80, the difference between 75 and 80 is obviously much smaller than 75 and 100, and you'd have to pay that entire gap. So having a reduction clause in your contract is a great plan B to fall back on if you are not going to have as many people as you would think, or if people are booking Airbnbs or booking rooms at different hotels instead of your hotel. That's one thing I want to mention too, is you can't always always assume that people are going to be staying at your resort or your hotel. There's no matter what industry you're in, people are going to be looking for deals. They're going to go stay with their friends at Airbnb. They're going to stay with their family in the area. You have to assume that a number of people aren't going to stay at your hotel, which surprises a lot of clients. So this is why it's good to have a room block reduction clause, just in case more people go and stay elsewhere aside from your venue, and you can reduce that number so it reduces your liability. Now, the third clause that I like to add into my contracts is the shortfall option. So if the group falls short on the room block, any attrition penalties can be applied to future events at the venue. The penalties can go towards rental fees, food and beverage, audiovisual, etc. at this future event. In this case, the future event must be confirmed within 90 days of June 2025 event. So these are just kind of examples. But this clause states that if you fall short on your room block, let's say you have a $10,000 attrition, they send you a bill for $10,000, you can choose to pay that $10,000 with cash, or you can transfer it as credit to future events. Now, this is kind of a pro and con. It's bittersweet because the liability is still there and you're still committing to a future event, which is going to be money spent down the road. So you could just cough up the money, pay it right now. But if you want to still transfer the value, instead of just spending $10,000 on lost rooms, you could, justify it as you're spending $10,000 on a future event, which could be positioned differently in your bookkeeping, in your P&L. So I like to do this with my clients because it doesn't hurt as bad if you fall short on a room block. If you're just committing to a future event instead of just sending them a check for 10 grand for nothing, that $10,000 is at least going to be valuable to the business and is going to be used instead of just wasted on a room block attrition. So that's why I like to have this clause in there. Clause number 4, room block performance and attrition clause. The group agrees to a minimum performance threshold of 80% of the total contracted room nights. Should the group fall below this threshold, the venue reserves the right to charge an attrition fee only on the difference between the 80% commitment and the actual number of rooms utilized. Any room nights released beyond 80% threshold shall be returned to the venue's inventory without penalty to the group. So this is basically saying, let's go back to that 100 rooms example, that you are only obligated to fulfill 80 out of 100 of those rooms. And let's say you fulfill 80 on the dot, you don't owe the resort anything for attrition because you only committed to fulfilling 80% of the room block. And this is pretty standard. Most resorts and venues will give you a percentage that you're responsible for. It usually falls between 80 and 90%. However, I just read through a contract for a client where they didn't have any clause in the contract whatsoever. We had to fulfill 100% of the room block, which I don't feel comfortable doing. I don't want to put my client in that situation. So I negotiated an 80% threshold into the contract just to make sure everyone was protected and happy. So read through your contracts, make sure that there is some sort of minimum performance threshold. And if there's not, you definitely have the right to negotiate that into your contract. Clause number 5, room resale clause. In the event the group does not meet the minimum contracted room nights, Snowbird, which is a client I worked with in the past, agrees to make a reasonable effort to resell the unused rooms. The group shall only be responsible for room attrition damages equal to the difference between the contracted number of room nights and the actual number of room nights not resold by the venue. The venue shall provide a report detailing resale efforts upon request. So this clause just states that whatever rooms you don't meet by your cutoff date, the venue will make a reasonable effort to sell those rooms to the public, and that you won't be responsible for those rooms that are sold. And this last part is actually really important. I have another clause later down in the next few slides that actually goes deeper on this, but the venue shall provide a report detailing resale efforts upon request. We had one venue we worked with where they sent us a bill for our attrition, and they expressed that they tried to sell a number of rooms, that they did sell a number of rooms. But then when you looked deeper on the accounting and the financing of all of those rooms, we noticed a few holes in their math, and we realized that they had sold rooms, but they still charged us for those rooms, which this clause existed in the contract, which was a wrongdoing on their part and actually saved us, $5,000 to $10,000 due to those rooms that were sold to the public. So make sure you have a clause like this somewhere in your contract that states if you don't hit your room block, usually there's a cutoff date. But I think I have a clause in here about a cutoff date as well. But if you don't hit your room block by your cutoff date, the resort that you're working with will try its best effort to sell those rooms to the public so that nobody is liable for them. Number 6, cutoff date adjustment. So most venues will do a cutoff date 30 days out from your event, which I think is way too far. I mean, just imagine yourself as an attendee. I usually don't book hotels until 2 to 3 weeks out from the event. I know that's a little late, but a lot of people will do that, especially if you work in a fluent market. If you work with people in finance, if you work with entrepreneurs, people who own businesses, which are entrepreneurs, investors, traders, whatever it is. If you work with an affluent group of people, they have the money to go and spend, book their flights and book their hotel a few weeks out from the event. So what I like to do is negotiate to have the cutoff date be at least 14 days out from the event, just to account for the people that will book rooms 14 days out from the event. 30 days is way too far. A lot of people will book rooms in that 30-day window, so just make sure that your cutoff date is 14 days out from your event date. Clause number 7, attrition billing transparency clause. In the event of room attrition penalties, the venue shall provide a detailed accounting of the unsold rooms, including booking data showing efforts made to resell the rooms. The group reserves the right to dispute charges if documentation does not sufficiently prove that the rooms remained unsold. So this is what I was talking about. You want to have a clause in there where you can look through the finances and make sure that the hotel, one, made an effort to sell your rooms, and also is properly accounting for the rooms that they did sell, and that those aren't being counted against you. And really make sure you check the math here, because like I said, we had a client that sent us a massive attrition bill, and when we went through the financing and the accounting, we noticed that they had some math that was wrong. They sold some rooms, but were still charging us for them, and it saved us actually a decent amount of money. So make sure you have this clause in place so that you can always check the venue that you're working with's math. Clause number 8, it says number 7, but this should be number 8, and this is the last one I'm going to go through in this video, the max responsibility clause. So in the event the group does not meet the contracted room block commitment, the maximum liability for unused room nights shall not exceed 50% of the total room block value. The venue agrees that any charges related to unmet room nights will be calculated based on the difference between actualized room nights and the contracted 80% minimum threshold. That's accounting for an 80% minimum threshold. But in no case shall the total liability exceed 50% of the full contracted room block value. Now this one is a little aggressive. I've requested to have this into a few contracts. Sometimes it's denied, sometimes it's accepted. But essentially it's saying that out of your entire room block, let's say you have 100 rooms, and let's say you have 100% of a threshold. You have to sell all the rooms, and you have 100 rooms. If you don't sell a single room, you're only liable for 50 of those rooms. So your room block attrition cannot exceed 50% of the entire liability. Some resorts just won't play with this. They're big enough and they have enough business where they're like, no, we're not going to do that. We don't feel comfortable doing that. That would put us at a big liability, which is fair enough. I always respect if they say no to this one. I'm not going to go to war with them over it. However, I have had some resorts add this into the contract. I've never had a client that only sold 50% of their room block or below 50%. Usually people sell at least 80% or in between 80 to 100%. But I like to have this in place just to help me sleep at night, just in case something goes horribly wrong. The liability of the client is significantly reduced. So those are all of the clauses I like to add into my contracts to protect myself, to protect my clients. Like I said at the beginning of the video, these clauses could save you a ton of money, $1,000, $10,000, or even $100,000, depending on how big your event is. So don't overlook room blocks. Watch this video multiple times so you understand room blocks and attrition. And if you have any questions about room blocks and attrition, please drop it down below. I would love to help any of you avoid making the mistakes that I've made in my career. And if you are a coach, consultant, course creator who's hosting events for your business, or even if you're just in the events industry, please subscribe and like this video. It helps this video get out to more people. And I think as many people in the events industry as possible should see this video so that the room block industry stops making so much money off of their clients that they're just basically screwing over. So that's all I got to say. I'm sure you can tell I'm pretty passionate about this topic. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.